As I'm sure most of you are already aware, the insurrection narrative is a lie. It always was a lie, and most of us could see through it, but now we have official confirmation. From timcast.com, report, FBI finds little evidence January 6th riot at U.S. Capitol was coordinated. In fact, they said although there were some groups that did plan on being there and breaking into the building, there were no real plans as to what was going to happen. No one centralized it, and Trump did not coordinate anything, nor did any far-right groups. It was just a riot. The narrative is falling apart. As I'm recording this segment, President Joe Biden is speaking to the American people about Afghanistan, and it ain't flying. Criticism is on both sides of the aisle. Democrats and Republicans, the mainstream media, are tearing into Joe Biden. He screwed this one up. You see, the Biden administration is hollow. It was a campaign based on hating somebody else, and that's all the Democrats have today. I received a text message from someone telling me that they were running against, what did they say? Marjorie Taylor Greene's accomplice, Lauren Boebert, or something to that effect. They didn't tell me what they were for. They texted me saying, can we rely on your support and make a donation today? And I looked at it and it just said, we hate Lauren Boebert, so vote for us. I'm sick of it. That's why they need the insurrection narrative, because they have nothing of substance to offer the American people. Afghanistan is chaos. The economy is in chaos. Gas prices through the roof, a labor shortage, a southern border crisis, and now Afghanistan. They have nothing of substance, no skill, no merit. They rely solely on telling you how much we hate the other person. So when I get a text message that says, give me money because you and I together can hate, I responded, you have not told me what you are for. Why would I support that? I wouldn't support it for the other way around. If someone texted me and said, we don't like Ocasio-Cortez, and that's it, I'd be like, what are you for? Because I could just be voting in someone who believes the same garbage as the other person I didn't like. And it's not about hate. I don't hate any of these people. I don't trust them. I think they operate in bad faith. And I don't think they have the skills or ability to lead this country. And that is what we are seeing with this false narrative. The Democrats relied extremely on this insurrection narrative, and they still do. Despite the fact that all of these news outlets kept saying Trump staged a coup or it was Trump's insurrection. And now we have them saying, yeah, no, Trump didn't do it. We knew he didn't because we listened to what he said. But what are we getting from leftist activists and establishment crony types? They're saying we all saw it with our eyes and our ears. It doesn't matter what the FBI says. Because they know they have nothing to offer you. Everything's in it's a crisis. What are they going to say? Vote for more of the same? They can only tell you, yeah, things are bad, but think about how bad they'll be if Republicans get in. I'm not a fan of the Republican Party. Never have been. I just think right now, the media, the establishment, the Democrats are telling us to our faces, if you vote for us, the only thing you will get is more complaining about somebody else. I'd like to know how we're going to get jobs back. I'd like to know how we're going to secure our southern border. I'd like to know how we're going to get these 15,000 Americans out of Afghanistan. I'd like to know those things. That's not what you get from the media. What you get is derision and lies. But my friends, a new poll from Rasmussen has come out showing that many Biden voters regret their decision. And if they were to vote today, Donald Trump would get their vote. And if there was a vote today, he'd win. It's one poll. I don't know if it's the absolute truth or anything, but I think when you look at independent voters disapproving of Joe Biden more and more as the economy continues to hurt, I think it's clear to see that this was all being maintained by a facade, an establishment narrative that is crumbling before our eyes. Let's read this story. Before we do, head over to timcast.com, be a member to support this journalism. You'll get an ad-free experience as a member and access to all of our members-only content, which for now is just the Timcast IRL members-only segments. We put up Monday through Thursday, but we are working on a couple more shows. We have to do like rehearsals and stuff and like branding. We got to make sure that we have the titles and the images and the graphics and all that stuff. So go to timcast.com, be a member, but don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, and share it with your friends. Maybe they won't like me. Maybe they are trapped in the mainstream media's narrative engine. I don't know what else to say other than let's go through all of this media and see exactly what's happening. Report. FBI finds little evidence January 6th riot at U.S. Capitol was coordinated, from timcast.com. A new report from the FBI is shedding more light on the events that unfolded at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, finding scant evidence the chaotic riot was a coordinated effort or organized plot to overturn the presidential election result. Quote, though federal officials have arrested more than 570 alleged participants, the FBI at this point believes the violence was not centrally coordinated by far-right groups or prominent supporters of then-President Donald Trump, according to the sources, who have been either directly involved in or briefed regularly on the wide-ranging investigations, reports Reuters. Quote, 90 to 95% of these are one-off cases, said one insider familiar with the report. Then you have 5% maybe of these militia groups that were more closely organized, but there was no grand scheme with Roger Stone and Alex Jones and all of these people to storm the Capitol and take hostages. FBI investigators did find that cells of protesters, including followers of the far-right Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, had aimed to break into the Capitol, but they found no evidence that the groups had serious plans about what to do if they made it inside, the sources said, adds the global news agency. I wonder if what that really means is they talked about it, but it was just talk. And then when people actually pushed on the barricades, nobody had any idea what was going on. I mean, what they're saying right now about Lauren Boebert, for instance, she gave a tour to people. Why? They're claiming she was involved in the insurrection. There wasn't. Well, there was a riot, and it was a bad riot in a bad place, and it is bad for us. The Capitol during the Electoral College count, that's huge. That's bad. So these people get punished for it. But how many of these people didn't riot? How many of them walked through open doors and didn't realize it? What we are dealing with is a failure of leadership. The police weren't there. The National Guard wasn't there, and they should have been. This should not have happened in any capacity. People should not have been there to be this angry. But the people showed up before Donald Trump finished speaking. And Trump did not say, go in and do these things. He said, peacefully, listen to some politicians. That's what he said. The clever propagandists for the Democratic establishment have cut together clips where you see Donald Trump saying, we've got to fight hard and strong. So go down to the Capitol. And it's like it's spliced together. He said, now we're going to walk to the Capitol to listen to some politicians speak. That's what he was hoping for. Trump was hoping for Mike Pence to be like, I'm rejecting these results and sending them back to the states. Many Republicans believe that was the correct response because of the lawsuits and questions around what had happened, but Pence wouldn't do that. He claimed to not have the authority, which in my opinion is absurd because what's going to happen? You're going to get sued. You take a look at what, de Blasio's doing in New York City. They just do illegal things, or what Joe Biden is doing with the eviction moratorium. They just do something illegal in defiance of the courts and then wait to get sued. Mike Pence could have done the same thing. He didn't want to. Nobody wanted to stick their neck out for Trump, except for Trump supporters. Many Democrats have long contended the January 6th riot was an insurrection pushed by supporters of Donald Trump to overturn the 2020 election results. So reporteth timcast.com. But let's take a look at some of the other news. How would you like to go for a wild ride into what the media has been saying now that the FBI of all sources is saying it was not a centrally coordinated event? There was no plan. It was a riot. It was bad. Lock them up. But that's it. Take a look at this. From Reuters. This one's from January 6th. Trump summoned supporters to wild protest and told them to fight. They did. It's from January 6th. 7 months ago. Told them to fight, and they did. Interesting date, though. It says 11:13 a.m. The chaos in the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday unfolded after President Trump spent weeks whipping up his supporters with false allegations of fraud. They're going the stochastic terrorism route, claiming that Donald Trump, by saying these things, had encouraged people to come down. I don't like playing this game. If you say something like, we got to fight, it's figurative, obviously. So then they're going to go ahead and accuse Trump of inciting violence. Trump did not centrally coordinate or plan anything. But here's what we're hearing from the left. They're saying, well, of course, but it was stochastic terrorism, right? What does that mean? It means the more Trump says, like, they're bad and someone needs to do something about it, eventually someone does, and Trump knew it was going to happen. Let's take a look at some of the other news that has been pushed over the past several weeks. From Business Insider, what's the date on this? Do they even have the date on this one? They don't. Retired U.S. general says the Trump White House was complicit in the planning of the January 6th insurrection. Complicit in the planning. So who is this retired U.S. general who just lied? Lieutenant General Russell Honore told MSNBC the Trump White House was complicit in planning the Capitol riot. Quote, "It's my personal opinion that the executive branch was complicit in the planning and the delayed response that occurred in bringing in more federal assistance to the Capitol that day," Honore said during an MSNBC appearance. "That's my own perception based on what I've seen and what I've heard and the fact, you know what? I'm just sick of it. We had the Russian narrative and they kept coming out and saying, I've seen the evidence. I know it's true. And then we learned that behind closed doors and under oath, they said, I've seen no evidence. I don't know it's true. But they can go on TV and lie all day. The planning of the riot, the FBI said there wasn't any. You see, this is the problem. They don't wait for the investigation. They don't wait for evidence. They claim that they're on the side of science, but what they really mean is mainstream narrative and consensus. If these people just said, look, what we saw on January 6th was bad. Let's see what the FBI pulls up before we jump the gun on this one and start making wild accusations about Trump's White House planning these things. Here we go. Politico. Opinion. Yes, it was a coup attempt, and here's why. What Trump tried is called a self-coup, and he did it in slow motion and in plain sight. They say, since last Wednesday, people have been arguing what to call what happened at the Capitol, a riot, an uprising, an insurrection. I've been in public calling it a coup, but others disagree. Some have said it was not a coup because the U.S. military and other armed groups weren't involved, and some because Donald Trump didn't invoke his powers in support of the mob that broke into the Capitol. Others point out that no one has claimed or proved there was a secret plan directed by the president, and that Trump's efforts to overturn the outcome of the election could never have succeeded in the first place. These observations are based on the idea that a coup is a sudden, violent seizure of power involving clandestine plots and military takeovers. By contrast, Trump's goal was to keep himself in power, and his actions were taken over a period of months in slow motion. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a coup attempt. Trump disguised what he was doing by operating in plain sight, talking openly about his intent. He normalized his actions so people would accept them. I've been studying authoritarian regimes for 3 decades, and I know the signs of a coup when I see them. Crackpot conspiracy theorists taking wild and crazed leftist and establishment sources, whipping it into a ball and eating their own refuse. This is what is happening. Someone writes an article that's an op-ed saying Donald Trump was staging a coup because I believe in an extreme interpretation of the event. Then someone else cites that story as fact and says Trump staged coup. And then they all read the articles in a circle like a whirlpool, swallowing their own waste and believing crazier and crazier things until it becomes the insurrection. Meanwhile, the FBI, for all of their faults, comes out and says there was no evidence that any of this was centrally planned or coordinated. But they're telling us right now that Trump was trying to keep himself in power, that he was planning the self-coup over a long period of time. No, there's no evidence. There's no evidence. But the media just runs with it. Here's the Daily Beast. Damn right, January 6th was a coup. This was Trump's call that led there. Then you have this from the Atlantic. Don't let anyone normalize January 6th. If you can shrug it off as just another incident of Trump talking too much, then you have already signed up for the next incident and the one after that, by David Frum. This one's from this month, from August 1st. They really wanted to push that narrative over and over and over again. Because of what I said. The only thing they have to offer you is Orange Man bad. Who do you hate? If you hate them, it's what do they call it? It's negative politics. There's a word for it. I can't remember the word, the phrase that describes this. Negative partisanship, I think it's called. Instead of saying we as political party are for these things and we want these changes and we oppose these things, they're saying that person's bad. Vote for me because that person's bad. And when you say, why are they bad? They say because they're maggots or terrorists or because they staged an insurrection with no evidence. Here we go. Juan Williams. On August 16th, just a few days ago, Trump's coup attempt should bar him from the 2024 race. Everybody's favorite Juan Williams from Fox News said, let's agree. Former President Trump is running again. He has $100 million in his political war chest, his GOP rivals for the nomination. including top congressional Republicans, fear him. One reason he might not run is if any of the several investigations into his business affairs leads to a criminal indictment. You see what they're trying to do to stop Trump from running again? I honestly, I hope it's not Trump. I hope Trump doesn't run. I hope it's a DeSantis or somebody else. But Trump's, if he runs, okay, so be it. They really don't want him to. They're trying to throw everything in his path, including all of the lies and the manipulations. His coup attempt. Well, here we go. Matthew Iglesias, formerly of Vox.com, tweeted out the story about the no evidence, saying, "I don't understand this story. Of course there wasn't a covert plot. The president of the United States was calling for it publicly. We were all there." Whoa. Wait a minute. Matthew, you were at the Capitol attack? Seriously? Wow. I knew a lot of people that were who wanted to go to see Trump speak, not the Capitol. I know a couple people who went to the Capitol to see Trump's speech. That was it. But you were there? That's weird. If you were there when Trump was speaking, you'd have heard him say, peacefully march down to listen to politicians speak. But what was he saying? What was he calling for publicly, Matthew? You see, this is the problem. That's a lie. It's just not true. Trump did not say, go do X. But there is something to consider in all of this. Outside of what the left is saying, perhaps it's not vindication. Perhaps the goal of this is not to prove a point and say the left was wrong and we did our jobs. Maybe it's because the FBI was involved themselves. Darren Beatty says, before taking a victory lap here, understand what the feds are doing with this admission. This Fed announcement is 100% about the FBI getting an excuse to justify kneecapping their investigations into militia leadership. There are many who believe that the FBI actually helped coordinate January 6th, that informants and undercover operatives were guiding and manipulating and pushing people in this direction. Some even argue that the people who were pushing on the barricades and starting the fights were probably, saboteurs or, undercover operatives. I have no evidence to suggest that's the case. There is a really creepy video of the first break-in where you can see people all black clad breaking through the windows and climbing in. And so the idea is, while we're demanding an investigation into potential informants and undercover operatives, the FBI comes out and says there was no centrally planned of any kind, in which case they don't need to look at the private communications of many of these people. So maybe that's the case. Maybe it's not. I can tell you this. I think the narrative is falling apart. We are seeing the emperor with no clothes. The Democratic Party has offered us nothing but negative partisanship, anger at the other side, and Joe Biden is flopping around like a fish out of water. Kamala Harris can't come out and give a statement on Afghanistan. Where's she been at? Jen Psaki's team didn't do their normal update, but then Joe Biden was supposed to come out at 1 p.m. and then he missed the 1 p.m. and then pushes it back. Supposed to go back to Delaware. Many people think that Joe Biden is sick because he's been going to Delaware over and over again and won't release who's been visiting him. And the man is about to turn 79. Or is he 79? I don't know. When's his birthday? It's like November or something. 79. Take a look at this story. White House goes silent after Biden's Afghanistan interview debacle. President schedules no public appearances, and Jen Psaki's team failed to host daily briefing. Now, this was from yesterday evening, and today Biden announced he'd be speaking at 1 p.m. and then at 2 p.m. leaving for Delaware. But there was a major backlash. People felt like he was running scared. It was funny. Someone from the White House said, Joe Biden won't shy away from hard questions. And then this public announcement, Biden cancels 1 p.m. speech. He pushed it back. He ended up speaking. He did. I'm not trying to say he didn't speak. But a lot of people roasted him for it, saying that the questions are from friendly press, as friendly as they can get, and that the administration is just absolutely in chaos. All of this stuff should come together to show you the lies of the machine. Take a look at this from Rasmussen. Election regrets. Most wouldn't vote to re-elect Biden. Most voters would not vote to re-elect President Joe Biden, and a significant number who voted for him in 2020 now regret their choice. A new Rasmussen Reports national telephone and online survey finds that if the next presidential election were held today, 37% of likely U.S. voters would vote for Biden. 43% would vote for Donald Trump. 14% say they would vote for some other candidate. Among voters who say they voted for Biden in last year's election, 12% now say they regret their vote. By comparison, only 2% of Trump voters now regret their vote. If a rematch of the 2020 election were held now, Trump would win because only 79% of Biden voters say they would vote for him again, and 7% would switch their vote to Trump. By comparison, 81% of Trump's 2020 voters would vote for him again, and just 2% would switch to Biden. 10% of Biden's voters would vote for some other candidate, while 12% of those who voted for Trump would vote for some other candidate. Of those who say they voted for some other candidate last year, 21% would vote Trump if the next election were held now, while just 7% say they'd vote for Biden. I love the memes. There's one where a woman is holding another woman's head up and it says, if you voted for Joe Biden, these are the policies you supported. It's not just Joe Biden, though. It's Kamala Harris from New York Post. Kamala Harris tanking in polls as she goes to ground on Afghan withdrawal. As I've said it before, and I'll say it again, where these things come together, this is important, is that January 6th is the perfect example of them saying, vote for us or face the consequences. Look at the evil boogeyman of the far right. Vote for us. You don't give me anything, I'm not going to vote for you. Unfortunately, the plan worked. It worked in 2020. They offered up no real candidate. They knew that if they chose a Buttigieg or a Kamala Harris or a Tulsi Gabbard, whatever the issue may be, or Andrew Yang, that it would be polarizing. A lot of people would say, I don't like the policies of these individuals. And so they might not vote. And as you can see, Trump gained something like 12 million more voters. I think more than that, like 13, around that. So they said, Joe Biden, stay alive. Literally. That's the article from The Atlantic. They said, all we need is your corporeal form. Well, when you're running an election based on not Trump, that means that you're putting in a hollow administration. We have no president. Joe Biden sleeping, disappearing, not doing press events, not speaking, not taking questions. We have absolute chaos now with Afghanistan, and Kamala Harris is nowhere to be found because we didn't vote for anybody. Joe Biden didn't come out and say, I got a bold 2-part plan. With Afghanistan, we're going to do this first and then this first. We're going to start with evacuating all of our troops, and then we're going to blow up the air. None of that. Nothing. Instead, Joe Biden kept calling a lid, not appearing for the press, and then Trump just kept speaking. And the Democrats were hoping that hatred for Trump would elect Joe Biden, just like with the insurrection is their plan to say you must hate, you must fear, you must oppose. No, please. I want to know what we're for. I want to know what we're going to do. The Democrats don't seem to do anything. No, don't get me wrong. Republicans don't seem to either. Now even Kamala Harris is getting roasted. So while Republicans are calling on the 25th Amendment, I'm not entirely convinced that the 25th Amendment is the right move because that just means you get Kamala Harris. And apparently most people think she's unfit to be president too. So then what? Nancy Pelosi? Yeah, get out of here. She's on the way out. So then I think it's what? Chuck Grassley? Oh, geez. My friends, is this the end of the American empire? It's the end of the big peak. I mean, it happens. Look, the Soviet Union fell apart. That seems crazy, right? It just overnight almost just gone. People woke up one day and they were like, I guess we don't have a centralized authority anymore. Why do that? I don't know. You can read history to figure out why these things happen. But is this it? We've got a presidential administration in chaos, a political party that can only rely. I mean, let's be honest, both that can only rely on hating the other person and not standing up for principles. How long can that go on for? Especially now with everything we're seeing with Afghanistan. China's mocking us, saying, look at the weakness of the Americans. You're a waning power. And I think that's true. I think the narrative is completely broken. The National Review writes, something is wrong with the president. Yeah, I think something is wrong with the president. And we knew this was going to happen because the dude's 78. Trump's pretty old, too. If he were to run again, he'd be old. That's why I'm like, DeSantis, he's younger, and he's done pretty well with Florida. Something is wrong with the president. Now, the article, for the most part, just goes through the things he was saying or struggling to say. ABC News manipulating what Joe Biden said to make him seem more coherent. And they end with talking about potentially Joe Biden ain't all with it. The president turned 79 in November. He last released a summary of his health condition in December 2019. In May, a White House spokesman said Biden had not had a medical checkup or taken a physical this year, but that he would by the end of the year. There have been no updates on the president's health since. Back on July 26, John Ellis astutely analyzed how it was acceptable to acknowledge Biden's age and mental condition if you used certain euphemisms. Somewhere along the way of the last few years, Biden transitioned from young old to old. Veteran reporters described the transition in code. He lost a step or two, or he's lost something of his fastball. You're not supposed to talk about it. If you do, and you're a Democrat, you're scolded for aiding and abetting the enemy. If you do, and you're a Republican, God forbid, a MAGA voter, you're a horrible hate monger trying to overturn the results of a free and fair election. And you probably watch Fox News to boot. The problem is that it's all there for all to see. Pretending not to see it is untenable. Something is wrong with President Biden, and we are all being asked to pretend we don't notice. The New York Post, August 11th. Biden won't release Delaware visitor logs despite 17 trips home. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Wednesday that President Biden won't release visitor logs from his Delaware residences despite making 17 trips home in 6 months. The decision comes despite the Biden administration's claim to restore transparency and trust in government, including with the resumption of limited release of White House visitor logs. Quote, I can confirm we are not going to be providing information about the comings and goings of the president's grandchildren or people visiting him in Delaware. You see how they do that? His grandchildren. So you're claiming the people who are visiting him are his grandchildren, are you? No, you're using that to make it seem that's the case, because the reality is he's probably being visited by specialists because the dude is old. Psaki said this at a daily press briefing. Transparency advocates say that the same logic that applies to the White House visitor logs applies to records of who's visiting Biden at his homes. Tom Fitton, president of the conservative group Judicial Watch, told the Post that this policy makes a mockery of White House claims of visitor log transparency. It's an easy way to bypass the alleged transparency they're promising, Fitton said. If they're going to take the position that this information should be public, what are they hiding when it comes to visiting his home? The presidency doesn't stop when he's visiting Delaware. He is presumably doing work, so the public has an interest in knowing who is visiting him there. Is Hunter Biden visiting him? Joe Biden is the one who had Hunter at the vice president's office meeting with his business partners. They say the links between the elder Biden and his son's business ventures are often murky, and I don't care too much about that. I think this is Joe Biden being sick. I think he is going home, so he has extreme privacy. It's harder for the press to see what's going on, and then his doctor can come and see him. Let me tell you, I'm sure the media will come out and say, Tim Pool claims without evidence that Joe Biden is sick. I'm not claiming he's sick. I'm saying if I had to make a guess, I'd say he was. And maybe he's not. I'm not saying I believe him 100% to be sick. I say I believe there is ample circumstantial evidence to suggest the president is not well, that something is wrong with him. I mean, look, the dude's old. He's past average life expectancy. I wish him the best. I hope he finishes his term. I don't think we want or need any of this chaos. This is what happens. People voted against. That's what the January 6th thing is all about. Voting against. So they put in place a sick man because they didn't care. That's our politics today. So what are we going to get? Are we going to get a Republican who just says, here's all the reasons I hate Democrats, and if you vote for me, I will continue to hate them? I'm like, that doesn't do anything for me. That's not going to make my life better. And so you have a lot of people. I'm saying to people like, I don't want to vote for the Republican Party because they're trash. They don't do anything. The Libertarian Party is pretty crazy. I don't know who I'd vote for. The Democrats have lost their minds. The system's fallen apart. And people say, Tim, if you don't vote for the Republicans, you're giving the Democrats power. So is that it? I vote for one group I don't like because the other group I don't like more. What are the Republicans going to do for me or anybody else? They don't seem to know. Several of the populist Republicans, the newer, younger, energized types, they seem to say we're about securing our borders, end the foreign wars, get the workers back and the manufacturing back in this country. I like that. I do. If we see more of that, I'm down. Outside of all of this, I'll leave you with some optimism. For one, we can see the narrative from the Democrats is all just bunk, but there's some good news. Check this out. Fox News' Greg Gutfeld is crowned new king of late night TV after he scores 220,000 more viewers than Colbert's Late Show on CBS. Comedian Greg Gutfeld's show pulled in the most viewers during Tuesday's late night time slot, with about 2.12 million. Take a look at that. Let's look at these numbers. Where we go? Here we go. Gutfeld, 2.12. The Late Show with Colbert, 1.9. Jimmy Fallon, 1.2. Brian Williams, 1.12. And Don Lemon, 570,000. That's amazing. Now, most of these viewers are older, so we'll see what happens as time goes on. We get at Timcast IRL every night in live viewership. It's I'll put it this way. It's hard to calculate because YouTube does this separate thing where they have like live viewer count versus like YouTube hard views of the full podcast. So they're different. But it's between like 300 and 500,000 every night on Timcast IRL. Mostly young people, not old people, not older people, mostly young people. So we're not beating Don Lemon. We're beating Don Lemon in the key demo, though. Don Lemon's relevance and all these other people's relevance is with the older crowd. Even Greg Gutfeld. I'm not trying to drag him. He's a funny guy. But Greg Gutfeld's probably crushing it in the key demo relative to everyone else. What does that mean? It means younger people are waking up and paying attention, and they're rejecting the lies. That's good news. But when you combine the key demo numbers for CNN and MSNBC and Colbert and Jimmy Fallon and all that, it's a lot higher than Fox News. So we will see. But it does feel like the narrative is shattering. Biden can't handle any of these crises, and it seems like everything's falling apart because of it. We'll see how it plays out. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.